So yes, welcome everybody. We're going to be hearing from Margaret in a moment. We'll have a short presentation from her, and then there'll be plenty of time for questions. If you have questions, as there's quite a lot of us, if you could put them in the chat, and I'll do my best to fish out questions kind of along a theme and then invite you to kind of deliver it, to unmute and then to give your question. The rest of the time, it'd be great if you can stay muted. The other thing before we start is a shameless plug from Area Quakers, which is the group that's hosting this session. We've got a series of workshops that we're running at the beginning of June. I've just put the details in the chat. These are for everyone across the area meeting to come to start engaging with our own personal impacts on the planet, particularly our carbon footprint. So you can click on the link there to get to the form and come along. There's all the information you need at that link too. So without further ado, we'll just start with a few minutes silence and then we'll get going.
Good evening, friends. I'm absolutely delighted and very excited to be here because we are embarking upon a transformation. And I can't think of anyone better than Margaret to introduce us to this vocabulary and this language of how we are going to future-proof the buildings in the Cambridgeshire Area Meeting, because not only does Margaret have the vocabulary, but she also has the last 5 years and many, many more years, but the last 5 years at Downing Place experience of a practical example that we're going to be let into the secrets of. So without further ado, Margaret, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. I've got two screens here, so let me just double check. Yes, good. Okay, it's working. This is St. Columba's United Reformed Church, which is where we started. just to remind you, perhaps you've been there to give blood or whatever, on the corner of Downing Place and Downing Street. Right, so what I'm calling the game plan for this evening, yes, you got that. I'm going to tell the story of our redevelopment in a shortened version, hopefully for about 20 minutes. Roughly, this will be our starting point, what we've completed as of the 23rd of April, and how we did it, particularly the low carbon measures. I'd like to also give you off the record the secrets Ruth was referring to, just some feedback on missed opportunities by way of a warning of what to avoid and a review of what we got right. Then I think we should stop, that will be plenty to take in, and discuss how this looks for people in your position. And I had originally thought we could add at the end a view of the future of low carbon retrofit of buildings that we so urgently need. But I think this may be asking too much from a single evening, but there is a bit more material if we have the time. Right. So here's some factors that determined our particular campaign. First of all, it involved the union of two city-centre churches, St. Columba's with Emmanuel on Trumpington Street, and that happened in March 2017. Secondly, the United Reformed Church has a regional synod which actually owns the buildings, and they backed the idea of us uniting, and that helped a lot to convince people who might have not been very sure about it. We were backed by a sort of central group. We had a sale offer for Emmanuel from a Cambridge college. That came through in February 2017. And you can see that we immediately then moved to the union idea. And this college, it was Pembroke, in fact, offered to accommodate us in our old building until 2020 while we redeveloped the St. Columba's site, which was a very significant window of opportunity, but it certainly focused the mind. It was a very short timing. Okay, so the building group which ran this, we took a property manager from St. Columba's and an architect, that was me, from Emmanuel, as the two major representatives from the two churches. But the brief for the design was actually responsibility of other groups, so that we had a worship group and a mission group. Now, when we got started, we discovered we had no drawings of St. Columba's, which meant we needed a survey, and this gave us a final area of 990 meters squared, and it cost $3,414 per meter squared. And just to say that Emmanuel had had the experience of redeveloping in 1990. And the architects we talked with were familiar with that and with the local URC, United Reformed Church, sorry, which is the denomination. Okay. So we'll return to these situations and just see how they compare with your situation. So it's important also to raise briefly the issue of group organization. As I say, we had this building group that was a respected core group, and they fielded continuous proposals, costs, decision for every element of the whole process. A summary of the progress and the key decisions needs to be issued to everyone regularly to ensure that the whole membership stays on board. And you must listen carefully to the worries that people have. You've got to also keep track of who knows who's been told what to keep everyone in the loop. Building group, or BG as we called ourselves, was 8 people, but only one of them communicated with the architects, and everything anybody did was copied to that person. Our elders met every 2 months, and we have 9 elders for the congregation of 180 members. And we had a redevelopment. Sorry, in terms of the building group, our recommendations then, once we filtered through this, went to the elders, and we were allowed during the construction to make discretionary decisions of up to 10,000. The elders then met every 2 months, and they made the decisions that they could, but other proposals were deemed essential to present, to discuss and vote on in church meetings. And then we kept a running development blog on our website, and we're very lucky. We have quite a few good IT people for that. Right, back here. Okay, so a low carbon redevelopment is quite a sophisticated piece of work. You've got to know the history and the aesthetic of the building. You need to establish where you are in terms of energy use at the time for the per square meter of building. You then need to look around you and compare. It's called a benchmark. How are other buildings meeting this challenge? And then you can say, well, we need to set a better target. But until you've done it, you can't really set a reasonable target. And once you've done that, then you need to feel that the team, and that will be the building group, the architects you choose, the consultants they bring in, and the contractor, that whole team has to be competent to do low carbon work. Or you consider it a learning opportunity, and then you have to make sure they find out and are trained to do it. Now, the professional competence that is needed to do low carbon specification for an existing building is really quite complex. You've got to understand energy, you've got to understand construction, you've got to understand design. And so those people tend to charge high fees. I was already in the building group. I made my participation contingent on their actually carrying out the low carbon design. So we had all kinds of other things we were doing at the same time. And again, that was, yes, it's going to be expensive, but yes, we're committed to doing everything we possibly can. Okay, so we interviewed 5 architects, and Archangel was chosen. They used considerable innovations in this job. The survey was a laser survey of the buildings. They were then able to build a 3D model from that because it was a laser point cloud. And then all the documents were kept live for everyone to check on Dropbox. Note that the briefing information did not mention sustainability. We got our architects before we brought up the question of sustainability. You may be quite different than that. So there was a huge learning process here. After we'd appointed the architects, I then wrote a paper on the potential for sustainability of these buildings, and I circulated it within the building group to see if we were up for this. With the architects, we decided to negotiate with the contractors, so they were in on the design process. And this is partly because of that window of opportunity where we were accommodated in our old building. We needed to move quickly. So what did we do? Here's Jack from Archangel Architects, and they were appointed in January 2018, just for the feasibility work stage. They did continue once a price scheme was delivered, but that was not necessarily going to be the case. And this is Jack Boynes, the project architect. He has in his hand a tablet with a 3D design. This went everywhere. It was extremely useful on site to keep track of the design, the services, the finishes, the furniture. So it wasn't until the interviews of our short list of architects, the subject of sustainability even came up. And that was as a quick remark at a meeting when we were preparing for the interview sessions. They simply said, wherever possible, the most sustainable route should be pursued, and that should be added to the requirements for the architects. And I did the minutes and I said, TBC, how on earth are we going to do this? But they said to me then, Margaret, we hope you will show us, simple thing, how to do this, how to make the whole project sustainable. And this was partly because they had re-roofed the whole of St. Columba's without adding any insulation. And so they felt they must not do that kind of thing again. Right, so I then, after the architects were appointed, I set out how our buildings could be made sustainable. And this was an 8-page document. And we circulated this once they got the survey and started working up schemes. We circulated a revised version of the paper to them. So it wasn't until they'd been on the job 6 months that we even mentioned sustainability to them. Right, so we had 2 votes in the congregation. The architects managed to have the strategy by July. The scheme was costed by a quantity surveyor by September. And then we started working, talking it up in small groups because we had 2 different congregations. Some didn't know each other, some who didn't know the building. So by November, we voted to spend up to 5 million while continuing seeking reductions, because everyone was terribly worried about how much money we were going to get involved in spending. And you can understand, from my point of view, I wasn't at all sure they were really going to back me in sustainable proposals. By January, all the consultants were appointed, including people on the kitchen, IT, audiovisual. Documents went to the contractor in March, and we had a price by May. The second vote from the church meeting happened on so the consultants were structural, mechanical and electrical, party wall surveyor, which is very important, particularly somewhere like Jesus Lane, legal for the contracts. The second vote of the church meeting then happened on the 19th of June. And it was at that meeting that I was asked to describe to the congregation the sustainable measures we proposed. So these are, and this will come back again, the fabric, it's called, the envelope of the building. So the roof, the walls, the floor, and then openings, roof lights, windows, and ways of cooling at night. Electrical and mechanical would be lights, the heating, ventilation, cooling. Energy sources. Who are we going to get our gas and electricity from? What about the chances of solar photovoltaic panels? And were we interested in charge points for electric vehicles? I then went through the baseline, which I'd established by 2 years of energy bills, benchmarks from the Church of England's survey in 2012, and then how we could monitor this by checking our new results against our starting point. I also suggested that we should become part of the eco-church movement because it was more than just a building. To be sustainable is a campaign for hearts and minds where people search their own individual lifestyles and work out the best thing they can do. And I was delighted that this was considered to present a very fine opportunity. It actually helped with the vote. So, sorry. This critically important vote was preceded by a 3D walkthrough of the proposed scheme by the architects. The effect was breathtaking, and we easily obtained our 2/3 majority. Now, there's still a video of me on the DPC URC website, the Downing Place United Reformed Church website, explaining these sustainability measures that I set out for people before the vote. Okay, so now I want to go through what was there, what we did, and how we did it. So this is St. Columba's United Reformed Church again. Our site included the church, 2 halls, that's the St. Columba's Halls and Gibson Hall, and the caretaker's house. And now if you can see my cursor there, this is Downing Street on the far left here, Downing Place, and you go around and then there's this little entrance in the back to the halls. They're completely hidden from the road, and this is the caretaker's house. Okay. I also needed to say that after this decision to go to try to be sustainable. The architects then engaged a certified passive house designer in September of 2018, but not until we'd made that vote and made that commitment or attempt to do that. Okay, so here we are. What was there? St. Columba's and the Gibson Hall and the St. Columba Hall are around to the back. Right. In terms of the position of the church, we're really straight in the city center. You can see the zigzag of the roof. So here's the church on Downing Street and Downing Place. At a right angle is St. Columba's Hall. And then again, another right angle is the Gibson Hall. And in terms of the larger context, we've got the Lion Yard car park, we've got John Lewis, we have the bus station, and a college, and then the whole university science, geology, anthropology site right there. We're really right on the sort of seam of the whole essence of the Cambridge city centre. Closer in, we're actually ringed by some of the hottest, at least before COVID, some of the hottest nightlife attractions in the city. So we have Vodka Revolution, we have Nando's, we have Varsity, we have Weatherspoons. It goes right to the back there. So we're literally ringed. And at the start of our campaign, we were grappling with night revelers 10 deep on the pavements. And of course, who knows now what the future holds for that kind of thing, or anything actually. Right, so what was there? Here's some interiors. On the left, the church sanctuary had untouched 1890s vintage woodwork, screens and pews. The large and small halls were classic late Victorian. They were fully booked with outside activities every evening. A funding application from the church listed 1,000 members of the community using the halls every week. Okay, so let's look briefly at what we did. For the church outside, we added new windows and views in from Downing Street. And we added a new welcome entrance and a disabled ramp on Downing Place. And this is the unfinished view of the entrance, which is now finished, but I didn't have a picture. What did we do inside? Here's the church we redid the ceiling and we did daylighting, and then we did all the finishes. And of course, all the surfaces. And this is the church ceiling with the daylighting in it. The larger St. Columba's Hall, so this is inside what we call the hub. The larger St. Columba's Hall was opened up to form a hub area, catering kitchen, and there's a mezzanine with small meeting rooms and views of the courtyard. And that's a sketch of the proposed plants for the courtyard, which you can see on the website. People are encouraged to sponsor a plant because it shows our commitment to protecting the natural world. So, how did we do it? Fabric insulation was first on my list. So here is the Gibson Hall roof being completely rebuilt. Insulation, roof light framing. Here's the hub. This is the steel mezzanine. Those arches, the trusses that you could see, and then the link corridor, the link corridor, and half of the hall space has been made into the hub area. Over the hub, the roof was completely rebuilt. And high performance roof lights and solar photovoltaic panels were added to the top. The church ceiling, this roof that they had put back without any insulation, we added warm cell insulation, which is recycled newspaper. A foot of it was blown in above the ceiling. High performance roof lights were built in for daylight and ventilation. They can be operated to let out the heat in a crowd or a hot summer day from remotely. Right, so the openings for the hub and the church, for the hub, we have daylight, ventilation, and solar shading, and as I said, and in the church, if you look carefully there, you can see secondary glazing bars. There's a Y shape there to the stained glass windows. So that gives us a much better insulated window, and they're big windows, and it also cuts down on the traffic noise. In terms of electrical, the entire site was rewired with LED lights throughout. Mechanical, we installed 2 efficient gas boilers, 2 in the church here and 2 in the basement under the hall. Various types of ventilation, including for the catering kitchen here on the right, and each has a very easy to use, a user-friendly control. In terms of energy, we have 16 photovoltaic panels. You can see those. We're outside now in the garden looking back at the hub area. 16 panels up there, which is approximately 5 kilowatt peak of generating power. We have allowed space and the wiring for a battery. This is to be seen whether that's the best course. Our electricity suppliers are Scottish Power, which is 100% renewable. We haven't yet negotiated our gas suppliers because there was a payment issue, billing issue. So we've kept the old ones on until that's sorted out. And then we are hoping to find 100% renewable gas, which is expensive, and there's not a great deal of it, but we wanted to invest in further use of further development of sustainable gas. So other measures while we're here, disabled access. The piano, the lift, which gets people up to do a reading or speak in church. Okay, so this is the successes. As I said, and Peter, it was terribly exciting. The church ceiling, we did get it done. And the secondary glazing, I have to say, the price tag for secondary glazing is £100,000. And I thought that my building group would not go with that, but we did. It's a lot of money. Triple glazed roof lights with external solar screens, those are also very expensive. On the energy, we had our solar PVs and the space for the battery. And we, you know, what we'll do about that, I think we do want a battery, but we might run an electric vehicle as a mobile battery and do vehicle to grid charging and selling. The most important and the most gratifying part of this whole campaign was hearts and minds. I'm just so pleased. I can't tell you. The contractors had, these are the church team, don't forget, they'd never seen PVs before. And by the end, the young estimator, site estimator, said, we are going to go in and now qualify to do past 2035 retrofits. I mean, which is quite a business. I was really pleased about that. We had a green service in church in January, which spoke to our very young people who are all either vegan or becoming vegan. We talked about the duty of stewardship of everyone of God's earth, and we dedicated the garden to our commitment to investigate sustainability and to preserve the natural world. The next month, we had a sustainability brainstorm. We had 25 people turn up for this who were unaware of each other's concerns for sustainability. And from that, we now have a sustainability group. The leader is an elder. He's a member of the Green Party. And we are now registering for Eco Church as of this last month. So I'm very pleased about all that. And I think it would probably be best now to just have a stop and think about how some of this corresponds to your situation. And then if you'd like, I can carry on a bit more talking about the general future of retrofit. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Margaret. It's been...
Oh, this is a plan. Sorry, that's the building. Quite a large.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's been wonderful to see the process and see the process not only from an expert's eye, but also in the context of a faith community, and what the wider impact is, and what the wider challenges are of approaching this sort of thing. So I think we've got plenty of time to explore things now. So one of Margaret's prompts there is, what's our situation? Are there any things that might be around our meeting houses? Now, we've got lots of different meeting houses that are at different points, but are there things around that that are particular differences or challenges or similarities? But I think also any other questions for Margaret are most welcome. There's one that's come into the chat from Graham. Do you want to unmute and ask your question, Graham?
Yes, thank you. Hello, Margaret. I wondered what alternatives you'd looked at to using gas as a fuel in the project. It's something I would like to see happen in our meeting houses over the coming years, that we manage to eliminate using fossil fuels at all, as far as possible, as fuel.
Yes, again, there was a lag between my sense of the urgency of decarbonization and getting off gas, and which I'm doing with my clients, and the perception in the church that this was just not going to work, not even worth considering in a very tight city center site. And I was very keen to try and look at heat pumps, even given a very short time frame and a lack of examples to point people to for non-domestic buildings. I think there are a lot of domestic heat pumps you can look at. We do have a heat pump, which is there for emergencies, for cooling in the hall in the summer if we have the maximum number of people in there. So we can, but it's not, a large heat pump that deals with the whole area. We didn't look at anything else besides gas and this attempt to consider heat pumps. I don't know, I don't really, I guess somebody did ask me recently about an electric boiler, but the advantage of a heat pump is, of course, that you get 200 or 300% efficiency with a heat pump. And to have an electric boiler, which has a fantastic cost of electricity with the same efficiency as a gas boiler, I mean, I never even considered that, no. So, and certainly we didn't look at anything else like biomass, which needs huge amounts of storage space, which we obviously didn't have, well, that's it, really. I mean, if we could have decked the whole thing out to passive house, we might not have needed too much heat, but it simply wasn't on. Our walls are 800 thick as it was, and to insulate that outside was impossible, and to insulate it inside was impossible. So we couldn't get the heat loss down to anything near passive house, retrofit or passive house standard.
Thanks, Margaret. I'm just going to turn off the screen sharing. Oh no, I thought I was, but I think if perhaps you could, then we can see each other a little better.
Okay. Yeah. I
That's
can't. So I don't know what.
That's lovely.
See.
That's perfect.
Okay.
There's a bit of a follow-up to that question, which you might feel you've answered more, but if you've got more to say on, talking about investigating ground source heat pumps.
Yeah.
Was the issue that the footprint, and I guess I might add to that, whether the space issue was an issue for air source heat pumps, or was it an issue of cost, or was it just simply complexity and time?
Well, this is part of the bit that's, was in the non-recorded bit. People were totally unfamiliar with the idea of a ground source heat pump. I simply said heat pump, and they got as far as the air conditioning units that they put in new buildings, the cassettes that do heating and cooling. And so I went to someone else, and as I say, it just wasn't on. They weren't going to have that. We were very tight for time. They just weren't prepared to explore it. But it seems to me what we will have to do eventually is a borehole. Boreholes are 10,000 a pop, and who knows how many you would need to do 990 square meters. I mean, the AC office where I used to work had to do 4 boreholes for 2 flats and 2 offices. So whether that would have been on, I would have liked to have got a quote for that. And I think that is going to be the way forward for tight city center sites. If you can get a rig in there, which we could have done to the outer, the hall's entrance courtyard, to bore down. But with a borehole, you never know whether you're going to get earth, the soil beneath your site is going to be suitable for a very deep borehole. And sometimes you hit what they call green sand, and then you have to do multiple boreholes because it isn't going to hold the shape for the fluid to keep transferring the heat in and out of the ground. So it's, certainly I think that's going to be the way forward. If, as it seems to me, the most urgent thing is decarbonizing, getting us all off fossil fuels.
Interesting and worrying to hear the kind of the knowledge actually is a big aspect here, and perhaps we can all do a bit by talking about these technologies, and anytime we're talking to contractors asking about these difficult questions, but there's a bit of a wall against, isn't there?
The construction industry is driven through the rear view mirror. They want to see somebody else do it first, and then they'll say, find out all about it. But to be the one who tries it, that wasn't going to happen in our team. It just wasn't going to happen. Not in that time frame. We could have taken a lot longer and faced down the threat to, the difficulties that we encountered.
Well, a call on our Quakers saying of living adventurously, that we've got to push that envelope. Liz has had her hand up for a while. Thank you for waiting, Liz. What's your question?
Just briefly on it, I've actually got a question, but briefly on the commercial scale ground source heat pumps, I actually did run a project that installed ground source heat pumps in 2007. So there is, it's in Cambridgeshire, right on the fringes, and anyone who wants to know a bit more about it can speak to me later. My immediate concern is about ventilation in the light of COVID, because I personally would not want to go into a building that used recirculated air. So how are we going to get some ventilation in our buildings that isn't just chucking heat out the window? Or out the fan, I should say. Has anyone got any ideas on that one? Because to me, that is quite urgent before next winter.
Hello, may I speak, please?
Is it an answer to that question, Andrew?
Yes, it's related to that question.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
And something really to do with speaking to Margaret, I mean, to ask, wasn't there mechanical ventilation and heat recovery in the scheme at all?
We have, where we added new ventilation for the loos, for the new entrance, for the little chapel that we have, those small spaces have their own little heat recovery ventilation system, and they are not airtight, so it's quite wasteful, if you like. And you simply dial it up. There's no particular guidelines yet, because the building didn't have any ventilation in those rooms. There's no particular guidelines on how high you have to set it. You get this sliding scale and you can go right up. But that is a big problem. And I think in the short term with COVID, surely we're going to just simply have to ventilate to get people back indoors, and then slowly see what the guidelines have got to be to make sure it's safe. I don't really have an answer on that.
Yeah, sorry, I just say I live at Marmalade Lane.
Oh, right.
Which we've been here for some years, and so I'm very familiar with all this. So I didn't understand, I didn't quite catch you, Margaret, when you said about air source heat pumps, why you didn't install them.
They wouldn't give us a proposal for air source or for ground source. They didn't even look at ground source. And when I tried to push them, they threatened to resign.
Oh, I mean, we have that at K1.
Yes. K1, it was a bone of serious contention between Mole and the owners of the occupants of the buildings. And it wasn't until the carbon factor electricity got down low enough that Meredith Bowles said, right, now we're really in the running and we're prepared to look at heat pumps. That's what I understand. I just did not have that situation under the pressure we were under. And it's a great pity to me. I really did my level best. But, you know, I'm a church member and somebody who was told, well, just, you know, make it sustainable. You know, it's a big issue. And you need people with experience of that who are prepared to research it for the particular instance.
Thank you.
The AC Architects office is an existing building and it does have a ground source heat pump, and they've had it since 2005. But I don't know of other retrofits where they've used a ground source heat pump. I'd be interested to know.
Okay, Richard, do you have a question? You're unmuted, Richard, but we can't hear you yet. It's completely silent still, so I'm wondering if it's your microphone.
I don't even see him. Oh.
Sorry, Richard, we can't hear you at all at the moment. Do you want to put your question in the chat? Sorry, that's a shame, but that will get it done. Okay, well, while you're typing, we'll go to Dorothy then. You're on mute though, Dorothy. We'll hear from someone soon. There we go.
I just wanted to share what happened in Peterborough, which is so similar about the heat source, about using either air source or ground source heat pumps. I really, really wanted to do it and got quotes, but the vast majority of the people in Peterborough knew nothing about it. And the other person involved, who'd done a lot of the work, really didn't believe in climate change. It was quite tricky and could see no point in us spending money and wanted us to go definitely for the cheapest option. And it's this whole psychology thing is you've never got enough time to do the talking and telling people. So that needs to happen at the very beginning, I think, really, to make we really want to go for making this as efficient as possible. I don't know if you know about the Gambling Gay Community Hub. I mean, they use ground source heat.
They have a big site around.
They had the football pitches, which
they have these.
But we had that in, we have a huge garden in Peterborough. We could have done it, but the 80,000 it was going to cost was very.
Oh, actually, and I should have done this. Downing College has slinkies for ground source heat pump under their lawns. Lovely.
Oh.
That's been around a long time. I just didn't quite have the time to get.
No, and it
absolutely. The non-believers are just saying, you must be out of your mind. We know about this, and you can't do it. And so you get something else, but it doesn't work that way. I didn't know enough personally to start throwing my weight around in church meeting and in the design meetings with consultants who were non-believers.
Yeah, I think that is the issue, isn't it? You've got to get the right people in who understand. I just wanted to ask, you had 5 kilowatt peak. Was there space to have put more solar, or would you have had to rebuild other roofs and things?
We looked at having another row of solar, but we are in the shadow of the Arc Cinema, which is 6 stories high. Yeah. So the shadow cast kept that ridge in just about as much sun as we were going to. I forgot to say this. I would love to have got planning permission to put them on the south roof of the church. That's where we up in the sky, and we could have had masses of solar all year long. But again, that was sort of got away from me, and the idea of going back on our planning permission. Again, and I threatened it, and the builder said, oh, it's bad enough getting up there, putting in those very high roof lights. Don't tell me you're going to send my guys out on the roof 5 stories up. We got to have all this safety. And anyway, there are many regrets. It's always what you could have somehow done if you've just been able to work night and day.
I'm from our point of view, looking on, it seems like you've done something incredible, and there are always going to be something that gets through. I wonder though, is the part of, I was intrigued that sustainability came in quite late in the process. Was that?
Can I just say,
what was the kind of story behind that, and was that the difficulty later?
Mechanical and electrical consultants. I went into Max Fordham, very, very adventurous mechanical electrical consultants. Their offices across the street, and I said, please quote for this. But their quote was 3 times the quote of the people we got. So again, it's not, you're not convincing people that Max Fordham is a good firm. Everybody knows that. You're saying, take them for something that most people don't understand. So anyway, so say your question again, Peter.
It was just really asking whether. Well, I was intrigued by the fact that you said that the sustainability kind of part came into the process quite late on. I was wondering whether that was by accident, or whether that was, were there any advantages perhaps of kind of then having, uninitiated who you were able to kind of convince, or was that a real barrier? Or
okay, so we had 2 churches, one of which was already beginning to register with Eco Church, and the other one which was capable of putting on a roof without any insulation. So I knew I had a lot of people to bring along on this, and I just felt we needed to get moving, and we needed to take people with us. And I couldn't just start saying, I'm a greenie, I'm only in this to get green points. So you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. I waited to be asked, and then I got on it And I tried to teach people as we went along, but that's what we got is as far as I got. And, you know, it was only a chance remark, as I said. We were getting ready to interview the architects, and so one of the building groups said, oh, by the way, you know, we really need to make this sustainable because we didn't do that with the roof. So can you just tell us how to do that, Margaret? And so I thought, okay, you've asked me, and I will do everything I possibly can now to bring that about after we've got the architect, after we know how much square meters we have, after we have some idea of what we can do and whether we can afford it. Then I will say, okay, let's do what we've chosen to do in a green way. I would have loved it if we could, and that I think you're going to be have a great advantage over us, and that you're already sold on the green idea. I'm pleased that by doing it, we've got more people interested in green, but we weren't all of a like mind at the beginning.
That's very interesting. And I think we've got a good community that are sold, but I also wonder about those who aren't there. We can't count, but we shall see. James, you had your hand up, but you've taken it down. Have you got a question?
I do have a question. Sorry, I put it
Go
in
for
the
it.
thing, but earlier you said one of your targets was to make the building as green as possible, or as sustainable as possible. Sorry, can you hear me? Was as sustainable as possible, but actually that wasn't specific enough. How would you, if we were going to do this, how would you set a target for a building for the architects to design, implement the changes of a building?
Okay, so I started over this business of baseline and benchmarks and targets. So your baseline, you have to know, you have to use a metric. The metric we have, for better or for worse, is kilowatt hours per square meter. So you have to know your square meters, which means a good survey, and you have to know your kilowatt hours, which means at least 2 years of gas and electricity bills. And really, I haven't done enough of this to know really how to use degree days, but you need to factor out things like the beast from the east, which it's just not, doesn't happen every year. You need to know basically on average per year how much energy you use to heat that space or cool it per square meter, and then you can compare it. So the Church of England did this. They did a survey of all the churches and halls. So I had benchmarks, and we were miles over the benchmarks. So that I was able to say that in church, you know, we're 80% more than the average medium-sized hall in the Church of England. And we're more than double for the church. So that's a very, very handy thing to be able to say. So then you can say, okay, so let's have a target of, I've got my report here somewhere, you know, getting down to maybe 100 kilowatt hours per square meter. Well, you know, Passive House is 15, right? So you got to have a target you can get to. It may be that you can do external insulation or internal insulation and actually bring your heat loss right down. Parenthetically, I have to say that fabric, this whole business of, you know, really transforming the look of the fabric or lining it so that the room sizes change and you have to redo all the joinery and stuff, it's major work, very expensive. When really, we're in an emergency here where we need to get off gas. So some strategies say, get your heat pump if you possibly can and size it for what you intend to do down the road and get off gas, and even use electric heaters or something to beef it up in a cold snap until you can get the heat loss from the fabric down low enough. It's not clear what is the best strategy because it does take so long and it is so disruptive to do these very the fabric measures that change the thing so much. You can get it up in the roof, you can usually get under the floor, but the walls and the windows, new windows, passive house, triple glazed windows, put in an airtight manner, it's very expensive. We should be doing it. If it's period building, they need to look right. Sometimes triple glaze is too heavy for sashes or whatever. It's not a trivial matter. So the target is, I think, first of all, you know where you stand. Then you say, well, wouldn't it be great if we could get down below 100, or maybe we want to try the Association for Energy Conscious Building is a very fine organization, and they have a building standard which is around 50-ish. So it's doable as opposed to passive house or retrofit, which are very low. So you can look at those. There's excellent work, research work being done by them, which I can talk about now or later. And that standard might be one to aim for.
I wonder whether Quakers have a bit of an advantage in some of our buildings, that simplicity is meaning our windows are a bit simpler and things like that. So we might have the last laugh on things like that.
Yes. Yeah.
But not necessarily all our meeting houses, I'm sure. Mick, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. Just a question about the materials that went into the building and all the green energy, sorry, all the non-green emissions, the CO2 emissions from the concrete and the steel and the manufactured equipment. Did you have a look at that?
In a word, not really. I mean, I got there and discovered that all the stud work they were doing was with metal studs. And I said, why do you have metal? Oh, because we think it's better for a damp building, whatever. The builders had already done that off their own bat, and it was all planned and costed and everything. And I said, the embodied energy from a metal stud work is much more. And they sort of said, embodied energy, what's that? So, you know, we're talking about, I mean, we're now looking much more carefully at embodied energy. And for air tightness, I'm concerned, you know, that all the foams and things, you know, they're probably hugely, there's a lot of carbon emissions involved in that. But yes, at that point, we really did not look at the emissions. And that certainly is something that needs to be done now. One of the other things the point I was going to make about the future is there is now this publicly available specification for houses called PAS, PA, publicly available specification, which is PAS 2035, which is a standard. And one is coming out at the end of the summer, we hope, PAS 2038 for non-domestic. And those standards use Passive House Planning Package or your EPC equivalent, which is RD-SAP. It's an assessment tool. And they give you, for each measure, the cost, and it's quite accurate, the energy you're likely to save given the configuration of your building, and they also give you the carbon saved. So you can prioritize for every measure. You can look across the board and see how much carbon is emitted to make the materials that you need, and then how much, for instance, by using a solar panel, you might be expected to reduce your carbon emissions. So that's very, very useful. And then after you've got that for each individual measure, and you can see if there are any really big winners, then you combine them into a package and see how they interact. And you can look at that package and see the cost, the energy saving, and the carbon emissions, carbon savings. And then you can just stage that to see how you might, which trades you need to do first, which part of it you might do first. You might go top down, you might go inside out. There are various ways of spreading out and phasing the work. So that is a very useful tool. I have to say it's not yet ready for non-domestic. It's quite different if there's nobody except possibly a warden or somebody living in place. the energy usage is quite different.
Yeah, can I just make a couple of comments on various things that have been discussed? So I think there's no certainty that eventually all of the heating of all of these old buildings, not just churches, but houses and all the old stock that we've got in the UK, I'm not sure we're ever going to get to electrical heating, even with ground source heat pumps. And I mean, there's talk about using the current gas network and using hydrogen in it.
Yes.
As long as it's green hydrogen, then of course it would have to be green hydrogen. So a solution for buildings like ours might be to wait until our gas network is supplying us with green gas. And I wonder if in the meantime, what we might do is to install air source heat pumps, and they'll provide a kind of a background heating. And then in cold weather, we simply turn on our gas and use it, but only for the times when we have to. And that will probably reduce our carbon footprint for heating by, I wouldn't like to make a guess, but certainly by 50% or something like that.
Yes, I think that system, you would call that a hybrid?
A hybrid,
so
yeah.
Your gas, and you're judging whether you need the gas because it's so cold, or whether you can keep the sort of basic level with a heat pump.
Yeah, you do as much as you can with the heat pump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can also get off gas and have storage type electrical heaters, or which you can use off peak electricity to heat up, or just small electric heaters, which are very expensive, but it is still not fossil fuel, given the rate at which electricity is, the carbon factor is reducing. So I think it's probably true that these new bits of software that the publicly available specifications are producing can help you with that. I don't, well, I work in a house now where we're putting in a air source heat pump and keeping the boiler for just that reason. The air source heat pump will run the only the heating, and the hot water will be from the solar panels and from electricity. And there's just the possibility of putting one or two of the less important circuits or something on, keeping them on the gas boiler. So that's, again, these are complicated things I am just getting experience of now, but I'm sure that that is something that needs to be considered, keeping both systems.
And air source heat pumps, I guess, are relatively easy to install. Is that true or not?
They take up a bit of space.
Yeah.
A bit more than a boiler.
If you're in a conservation area and you want to, well, anywhere in a conservation area, you need to get permission. They need a meter of air around them. And I guess at Marmalade Lane, they're just about got a meter, probably about half a meter. But you're told to have a meter around them. And there has been a lot of concern about noise in their planning stipulations about the distance from the boundary because of the noise. But they're now, Mitsubishi, for instance, is making ultra quiet ones from crowded, from Japan, where they have crowded cities and everybody uses to get their heat pumps for heating and cooling, which fortunately we don't really need to use them for cooling yet. And so we're possibly in a better position there. So, but there are regulations about them. Installing them, you've got to have room for the largest thermal store you can fit in your house. And if it's a small house with a combi boiler, then that's a difficulty in itself, getting in the cylinder. And presumably it could apply for meeting houses too, where you, I don't know what, if you have cylinders already for hot water.
That will
generally.
Unless someone knows, I think that's something we'll need to explore for each meeting house. But different stories in different buildings. I guess the thing I come back to on this is actually net zero 2050. It's a huge challenge, but actually, if you look at the Committee on Climate Change, if you look at the International Energy Agency report the other day, electrification and heat pumps is the most efficient way to get there. That's if we've got one wind turbine, we're going to get the most heat out of it. And green hydrogen and things like that, it's going to be a very limited resource for far longer. So
Well,
to lead on that, you know, today is to put a heat pump in, really. To be waiting for hydrogen is not leadership. But yeah, it's not easy. Anyway, I'm talking too much. There was a question from Ruth, which has been in the chat for a long time, so we should certainly come to that, and then perhaps come to a close.
So I'd like to ask Margaret to turn everything around and tell us what, in the example, for example, of Jesus Lane refurbishment and refitting, what would be your dream team? How much would your minimum timescale be? And to get this sustainability from people's heads to actual practice, and what could you do for us?
Well, I think one of the useful things about going through blow by blow what we had to do for Downing Place United Reformed Church, you do have to know a lot about what you're doing with the building first. And my dream team, I couldn't really say, I'm not sure I would work with Max Warner, but anyway, there's various people now who know a lot more. And I think you do a lot more research on, you know, architects who have done other churches, although I haven't found many ground source heat pumps. And certainly the mechanical and electrical consultants, there would be many others to consider. You've got to have people telling you about your relationship with your neighbors, your party wall, whether you can actually get a rig in the back to do a borehole, for instance. And all that has to do with dimensions. It's a huge puzzle of all kinds of levels. The time frame, it was surprisingly quick, really, to get, once we knew what we were doing and we'd got the team together, we just had to get on with it. And then you know, we're basically under budget for all that worry. If you know, having a deadline really doesn't have to concentrate the mind. You just got to keep going. Time frame, I mean, we did it in about 19 months, and it's a huge job. They say you can get time, or you can have quality, or you can have low cost. And if you can let it run longer, then you can probably get the other two, which are going to be more important in the end. So if time is something you're flexible about, and we had tenants who were out in the cold waiting, you know, for, but for COVID, we'd have been in a mess with our tenants, but they couldn't meet anyway. So, not saying COVID was a good thing, but it ended up making the conditions different from what we'd planned. So how long, I don't know the square meters of the buildings, you know, I can't really say, but, you know, I think it's the early thinking, and also the establishing of a good team, and the establishment of confidence in the wider group that these people are going to make a decision, and that you personally, if you're not in that team, you probably don't have time to go through every single step. And so you're going to go along with them. That keeps things rolling, but you've got to keep those people with you by telling them what you've decided and essentially why. And, you know, in our case, we were terribly worried about cost, and we had to keep getting the quantity surveyor on early and then saying, we could do this, we could do this. And again, he's done a wonderful job. We're really basically on budget.
Well, thank you so much, Margaret. We were aiming to end at 8:45 and we've gone a little bit over that. So we can bring things to a close there.
Thank you. It's been very interesting for me to put this talk together.
I'm so glad, and it's been great for us to hear the story and start to imagine what our meeting houses could become. And in fact, imagine our meeting houses, because we've been away from them for a while, or at least I have. But thank you everyone for coming, and have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you very much.
Please silent.
Bye-bye.